Today on Nerd Center, we are going to be looking at the top 5 animated superhero shows that were cut short. As previously on this channel, you may have seen that we've talked about shows like Young Justice, and so I'm not going to be counting shows that did come back, but shows that in a perfect world, if everything was good, and we know that the creators would make them like they should be, and an homage or in continuation of the classic stories, in a perfect world, these are the shows that were cut too short. And we're not just talking about shows that we just wanted more of, like, say, Batman the Animated Series, which, of course, it would have been great if there was more of it. We're talking about shows that ended abruptly, or shows that were canceled, or shows that just feel like the story wasn't finished. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. Let's get into it, starting with number 5. Spider-Man, the Animated Series. Spider-Man the Animated Series from the 90s did have one of the longer running times of the 90s Marvel series, along with X-Men the Animated Series. But in my opinion, I felt that the show was just a little bit too short. And when we kind of go to the end of the series, there will be some mild spoilers from the show, so just be warned. But after the events of the Secret Wars, that kind of thing that we get towards the end of Spider-Man, we ended up getting to this part of the story where in the side earlier we had found out that Mary Jane, who Spider-Man had married in the show, was not the real Mary Jane, but actually a Hydro creation of some kind in relation to Hydro Man type of thing. And the real Mary Jane was missing. And so we kind of, at the very end of the show, we're like, we're going to go find her. And then it's kind of cut off, and we never really get back to finding out what happened to her. Also, after we just went to the Secret Wars. I just feel like there were storylines that they could have continued on. Like, we never really find out what happens when Peter gets back to Earth after all this event, after all the team ups and everything that's happened, and him going to different universes and meeting technically in our real universe and all the different stuff that happens. So I feel like there's a lot more to this story that could have been fleshed out, even though that this was a fairly long-lived series for that time. But it definitely could have gone a little bit longer and it fleshed out more things, like what happened to Mary Jane, where was she, because it was never really clearly explained, and kind of Spider-Man kind of getting reestablished back on Earth. I think that it didn't even need to be a whole nother season or anything, but they could have expanded it at least a few more episodes. And that's why it's number 5 on this list, because it didn't need quite an entire season probably to wrap things up, but I feel like it just kind of ended abruptly, and it definitely could have used at least a few more episodes to kind of tie up loose ends to end the series. Number 4, Batman Beyond. Batman Beyond was one of the DCAU shows that ran from the late 90s into the early 2000s, and it was only 3 seasons long, and it kind of fell in between the Batman and Superman animated series and then, of course, the Justice League series that ran right after it. This show was kind of cut short due to the fact that Justice League was airing, and a lot of the same creators that worked on Batman Beyond were moving to Justice League, and so the show kind of got shelved. There was also some delays in production, as the last episode of the series, technical series finale, aired around 9/11. It was delayed a week, but it had been not released. The previous episode had not been released since April, so there was a big gap. There's stuff that happened that aired on Cartoon Network instead of Kids WB and all this stuff. But the series just kind of ended very abruptly, so that makes it worthy of being on this list. But as of course we know, there was a movie, Return of the Joker, which technically happened afterwards chronologically. And of course, there is some stuff in Justice League Unlimited, which I will not get into specific details about that, because obviously if you've watched it, you know stuff happens in those episodes that you probably don't want to know about if you haven't seen the show. But anyway, that kind of is what people would consider the finale of Batman Beyond, and really it kind of ties up all of the DCAU in that one particular episode called Epilogue, that you probably, if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. And that was kind of where Batman Beyond ended in spirit, even though it wasn't the actual series. But the way that the show actually ended, I felt like it could have gone a little bit more, and it just kind of, with the abrupt stop with the series, it kind of left more room to see kind of what happened with Terry. And they thankfully did give us glimpses into what happened to Terry afterwards, obviously with the movie and the epilogue episode and some of the stuff that happens in Justice League Unlimited. But I definitely think this could have been a show that we could have gotten to see Terry, I guess, getting out of the shadow of Bruce and all the different things. But it was been a lot more room to develop, I think, and I think that Batman Beyond definitely could have ran just a little bit longer. But at the very least, we did get those other things to kind of finish it out, which is why it's not super high on this list, but it's definitely a show that could have gone a little bit longer. Number 3, Teen Titans. This show was, thinking back, probably one of my favorite shows, and it showcased a lot of sidekicks and different Teen Titan characters that we hadn't got to see in the DCAU and different things that were out at the time. But this series lasted for 5 seasons, which is partially why it's only number 3 on my list. So it did get a good length series, about the same as the Batman, both getting 5 seasons. But this show kind of ended with a cliffhanger kind of thing going on. We get the final battle in the not in the last episode, but the last couple episodes we get the final battle. They fight all the villains. They team up with the other people. It's all great. But then they have one final episode at the end that kind of brings Tara back into it, which if you've seen the show, you know that she kind of was a mystery around her about what happened to her. She disappeared and kind of tied into Beast Boy and all this different stuff. And so they didn't really clarify all that at the end, and they kind of left it hanging right at the last episode. And so it kind of felt like there was room that they could have moved forward. Plus, not to mention that about every character kind of got a season, like arc. Like Robin got season 1, and Cyborg, I believe, was in like season 3. And then Raven got on a season, and then Beast Boy kind of got the last season. We never really got a Starfire season, so that also to kind of round off all the characters kind of getting their own arcs in a season that I think they could have done one more. And like I said, with Spider and the Seas, I don't necessarily think it had to be a whole season, although I think it should have probably been a whole season. But they probably could have wrapped it up in some few episodes. But just for consistency's sake, they probably should have made another season of Teen Titans. There was just felt like there was some storylines that weren't wrapped up, and you kind of thought they gave some tease in the Teen Titans Go movie. There was a in credit scene, and there was apparently a Teen Titans like in credit scene that kind of hinted like they were going to come back, but it was really, I believe, just hinting towards the Teen Titans versus Teen Titans Go. So really, they've kind of had a squandered opportunity with Teen Titans, considering that they've had the Teen Titans Go series running for so long with the same actors and the same, on Cartoon Network, that they could have had them all doing the real serious regular Teen Titans as opposed to doing this kind of kiddie silly version. They could have continued on with the story if they still had all these people on board to do this. They could have continued on with that, and that's why this show should have continued on and left us with the fans wanting more. Number 2 on this list, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Yes, this show was canceled way too soon. It was canceled for a really bad replacement, Avengers Assembled, which went to the kind of MCU-styled look to these cartoons that they kind of ran with in that time frame on Disney XD and such that they were airing, trying to capture the movie audience, I guess. But it was really a mistake because Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes really captured the comic feel. It had the comic original group. It had so many different storylines going on. And it kind of combined stories from the comics while also kind of updating them and tweaking them to kind of work for the show, but still honoring and paying homage to the comics in the cartoon. This show only lasted for 2 seasons, and it was, like I said, canceled for this other show. And if you even watch Avengers Assembled, there is a clip in that show that shows the animation style from Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I should say, in Avengers Assembled, in a flashback, which makes me think that they already had more worked out for this show. And I believe I've heard things about them having more for this show, but of course it being put to the side. So this show, even though it did kind of end in a sense, like the last episode that aired could have been considered the finale. They fight Galactus. They have the little end, they all save the day. So it kind of ended, which is why it's not number 1 on my list. But this show was definitely canceled way too early. only 2 seasons, the best adaptation of the Avengers over the movies, over any other cartoon. This is like the Batman the Animated Series for Marvel, as far as like there being the definitive characters of the Avengers is portrayed in this. Like if you look at the characterizations of each of these characters, these are what you would think of. These are what the most accurate portrayals, I should say, of these characters are. And this show was canceled way too soon. It's a shame that they replaced it with what they did. And this is one that definitely should have lived on for a much longer time than it did. Now, finally, we come to number 1 on our list, which is The Spectacular Spider-Man. The Spectacular Spider-Man was another show that was canceled way before its time, only running for 2 seasons, with the first season being on the WB with like the other kid shows that had been on the time, but then kind of getting into limbo before kind of finishing up on Disney XD for its final season and kind of getting shelved, much like Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, for another Spider-Man show that came not too long after it in the future, which is Ultimate Spider-Man. Also in that same kind of MCU-ish style, even though at the time they didn't have the rights to Spider-Man, so it still had a bit more comic stuff in it, but that's beside the point. But Spectacular Spider-Man was one of them, like the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, that was able to take the comic book stories and kind of mix them into this own new flavor, like a very iconic Spider-Man stories that was infused into this show while also kind of making it new for the show. So this is really, these kind of shows show the good examples of how you can take the stories from the comics and use them to make a even better story. So you pay homage, you follow the comics, but you still have something new and fresh for the audience. And these shows show why. Now, this show probably had something to do with the rights issues of Sony and Spider-Man and Disney getting Marvel all in that kind of time frame, maybe a little bit before. And this show was shelved, and it was really a good portrayal of Spider-Man. It had all of his supporting characters. It had a good mix of all of his rogues gallery. The voice acting was good for the characters, and this is one of those shows that should have continued. It was only 2 seasons. It was very, very short-lived, and this one was definitely the most cut short. But like I said, the other ones, I could say that they had a kind of an ending, which is why this one just kind of ended. You know, it was, at best, it was a season finale. We kind of got that finale, but then there was so much more to be explored. Spider-Man is such a rich history in the comics, and this would have definitely been a great show to kind of continue exploring all the different aspects of Spider-Man. So it's definitely a shame that this only lasted for as long as it did, and that is why that is number 1 on our list. Now, obviously, I would not want any of these shows to come back now in this day and age, because I know that they would not be treated with the proper respect, and the people making them probably would have other agendas involved instead of what's going to be what they should be doing as far as honoring the original and continuing off of it properly. Obviously, we had the troubles with Young Justice, and now it is not being renewed or canceled, however you want to call it, as of now. Batman the Caped Crusader, which is supposed to be a spiritual successor to Batman the Animated Series, is being shopped and not coming on HBO Max. And we are going to be getting X-Men 97, which is a sequel to the X-Men 92 series that is going to be on Disney Plus in the MCU's realm. Not tied to the MCU probably, but done by Disney Marvel. And I have no idea what's going to happen with that. We've come out with some creators saying they need to be fans to work there. That's what someone said that's working on the show, and that does give me a little bit of hope that they could do something with this show. But Disney has not done anything to instill any kind of faith in what they're going to be planning on this with the show. So we will have to wait and see. But for now, these are the shows that, in a perfect world, mind you, should have came back or been finished and extended to finish off the story that had already started. But guys, what do you think? Did I get this list right? Did you think these shows needed to go on, or do you think they ended right? And what shows did I maybe miss that you thought should have gone on longer? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.